this deal that you're getting from society that, you go to university and then you're there for 2 to 5 years and you're having a really good time, right? At least most people are having good times. And you have access to this cultural and intellectual and artistic abundance. And then the moment when you start getting good at it and start enjoying it, they kick you out. And they're like, well, that was this. Thanks for your money. Now you're an adult and now read newsletters.
So today I am so excited to be talking to Anna Gott. She is an internet friend who has built a vibrant internet village called the Interintellect. I think it's a community of curious humans exploring ideas online, which is like, it just benefited my life so much in terms of other people to explore ideas with and probably readers for my book. But she has such an interesting past, has done so many things, was a published poet by the age of 19, was writing lyrics for underground bands in Hungary, screenwriter, playwright, startup founder turned somebody that did spawn the Interintellect. Welcome to the Pathless Path, Anna.
Thank you so much. I feel like for me, it's like pathless, paths, plural, or something like that. Definitely, yeah. There's a whole highway system going on here.
We'll definitely explore that. I'm so fascinated with people who have reinvented multiple times. But the question I start with is, what are the stories and scripts that you grew up with around what you were supposed to be doing in the world as you came of age?
That's such an interesting question. I think for me, there were multiple completely contradictory stories that I had to internalize or espouse. And I think in the first 30 years of my life, I tried to either do by all 3 or 4 scripts that I had, despite their being completely contradictory, or I would try to kind of cyclically live by one or the other. And I think for me, and I'm happy to kind of go through the ones that come to my mind right away. But I think for me, the journey was to understand how deeply contradictory these expectations are, and that it's impossible. And also that if there are, some people reach atheism through understanding that there are all these contradictory religions that are, each of them, every one of them is convinced that it's the only one path. And then you kind of hack the code of what religion is. And I think the same goes for overly dogmatic expectations of people. At some point, you realize that it's impossible to do.
What were some of them?
So some are gendered and some are not. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why they are so contradictory. So on the one hand, definitely a narrative of success. And of not being on the trodden path, of being a very autonomous creator, an autonomous maker. I think multiple generations of my family had seen themselves as people who make something people want, and most of them did. I think I'm probably still the least successful person in my family ever. And so that was one of them. And then later on, when I grew up and I started interviewing my older family members, I learned more about, social mobility, surviving the Holocaust, losing everything in one war or the other, and starting from zero, or immigrating, and the narratives and internal strengths, needed for overcoming those obstacles. Some narratives that I had were very gendered. And also very contradictory within that. I think most women will tell you that, you have these completely nonsensically contradictory expectations projected at you. So I definitely had the eldest child, smart daughter shall bring glory to the family and somehow money for the parents. I had shut up and marry well, put out your boobs and marry well kind of things. That was very nice. Yeah, definitely great, advice to daughters. But I remember turning 30, I was in London and feeling all of a sudden that most of the narratives that I had as a woman had run out because they really only implicitly, stand until you're 30. And where I'm from, really subconsciously, I think most people think that at the age of 30, a woman should have already absorbed into her family, should have lost her identity by that time. And to me, that was incredibly liberating. I mean, I started Interintellect when I was 31, so just 1 year after this. And a lot of things had to happen in my private life and with my immigration, and some of these scripts to have fallen, away for me to start that. But I remember this almost intoxicating sense of freedom at age of 30 that I have failed as a woman. That's great. Now I can do anything I want. I can just be a human. I can create. I can start a business. I can get rich, do whatever I want, and that was just absolutely fantastic. And I think for women at the age of 30, it kind of coincides also with this weird change in how people relate to you. I think for women, a lot of things really start at the age of 30. That's when people first start listening to you, taking you seriously. And so for me, that was a great, a very interesting, it kicked off also very difficult periods in my life, but I feel that my identity basically started there. And I was also like 31 when I realized that I was smart. So that also helped.
What are some of the influences from growing up in Hungary? I mean, Eastern Europe is such a unique experience. I mean, you compared to me, I didn't really face
such a
crisis.
polite way of putting it, by the way. It's so interesting. Yeah.
Well, I think for me, I didn't face any crises or challenges really in the US. Like we had a pretty smooth existence, and you saw rapid change, right? And what was the effect of that, like growing up as a kid? And it's challenging, right? But there's also strength that comes from that, I imagine.
Yeah. Oh, although when you posted those photos on Twitter where show me where you grew up through photos of food, to me that did look very challenging.
we have our flaws.
only like
yeah, 90s food culture in America was a low point in food culture for all of history.
I'm sorry. My timeline is like people from Malaysia, people from like South India, and then poor Midwestern friends who will like post frozen dish, and I feel so sorry. I just want to fly over and feed you guys.
This is why I married someone from Taiwan. I've course corrected, and I've married into a good food culture. So
that's very clever. I think Tyler Cowen would probably find this a very worthwhile strategy. It's an interesting thing. I love Leonard Cohen's song, "The Future," when you see the empires rise and fall in front of your eyes. I think that's definitely true in Eastern Europe. I mean, Hungarians think that they are Central European, right? And it's everybody else who thinks that we are Eastern European. And when you actually go there, these nuances are there in weird ways. But that's probably for a different podcast. You don't know when you're young why people are as they are. You kind of see the symptoms, but you don't know the disease. So there is a certain kind of shiftiness and instability in the worldviews, susceptibility to certain ideologies, a distrust or trust for close circles of friends and family, but a wider social distrust. And then when you start, at least if you're a curious human, you will start asking questions and reading books, and you will realize that, actually, if you were part of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, then very likely between 1919 and 1963, your family lost everything, at least at some point. Like somebody came and took your stuff, and your fields, and your shops, and your doctorate, and your children, like actual things that you are very attached to, and your identity. And I remember when I was a new immigrant, and I really, I left everything behind, like my car, my clothes, my boyfriend, my apartment, my life, my good name, my career, my entire network. And I started everything from zero when I was age of 30. And I remember feeling extremely exposed and depraved, of so many things when I was in London at the beginning. But feeling that this is such an ancient experience of starting anew. And it's actually what's not normal is never having to experience this in the modern world in one way or another. So there's definitely, and there are great philosophers writing about how, from Adorno to later thinkers, how, if you grow up in an environment where inhumanity has happened, then you will have much lower expectations of your fellow humans, or your ideological build-up will be very different. So yeah, I definitely grew up in this, anything can be taken away from you. My grandmother told me, like, anything that's not in your head can be taken away from you. So be smart. Read books. Of course, now we know with technology and other methods that even what's in your head can sometimes be carefully taken away from you, but it's still a little bit more secure there than material possessions.
Who were some of the big influences in terms of writers and people you were reading? I know you've read a ton. I feel like your references are just incredible and send me down so many curious rabbit holes.
Oh, really? Have you read anything in your life that somehow came from Interintellect or my recommendations?
It's hard to even know at this point because so many of the people I know are 1 or 2 degrees connected to the things you've built. Yeah. So probably everything.
We have the same. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I hope to, but I also think that, in certain circles, my references are very normal and shared. It's just that I've changed context so many times that I picked up different, and of course, I always wanted to read a little bit different things than everybody around me, would be reading. So yeah, probably it's a mix of the obvious and stuff I sought out for myself. I think when I was starting, I'm thinking probably the weirdest things that I was reading were dictionaries and encyclopedia, and I was just very curious about words, and I would just sit on my carpet and read a word and try to memorize it. And then my game was that I would either be a French dictionary or an English dictionary or just a thesaurus kind of thing. And then I would learn a word. And my game would be to think a sentence and immediately build the word into it. And just continue thinking. So not stop your thinking. It's almost like, I don't know, probably there's some TV show somewhere that or game show that has this. So you get a random word from a dictionary, and then you have to use it immediately. And I think I actually memorized so many words just through playing this, I don't know, in my teens when your brain is still working properly. Books, I think for me, just novels. I was probably my early 30s, late 20s when I first really started reading nonfiction. I still am on the fence about nonfiction many, many times, not just because it's very, very often not the author who wrote them, or the author is not the name on the cover, or how to say that. But you published something outside the, the traditional route. So I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but the content industry can be a little bit exasperating if you're looking for a really original piece of thought or content or story. So I was just reading the novels. I was trying to read every good story that would capture me, and I, like everybody where I was growing up, you were a little bit dissatisfied with your current whereabouts, and so you would be reading about what's happening everywhere else, and travel and feel completely boundless through your reading.
So take me to London at 30. Yeah. You pretty much started over, right?
I actually start over, yeah, very quickly. I'm still recovering. I think I still have PTSD over that.
Yeah. What were those first weeks like?
The first weeks were good because I did not know what I got myself into. First weeks, I was like, this is going to be fine. And then it was kind of okay for a year. And then it got very tough. Because for the first year, I thought that I would be able to have a kind of bipolar existence where I would go back to Budapest, but I would have a London life. And somehow I would use these two lives in a way that strengthen each other. And then in January 2015, it became clear that I had to leave for good. And then started a probably 2-year period, but really it's only just ending for me when it was really starting from rock bottom. So being completely broke and without a place to live, without friends, without any money. So that was very interesting. It changed my mind about a lot of things, I think, at the time.
Like what?
It changed my mind about states of grace and searching for a higher being. Because I always thought, I went to a Catholic school and I read, some of the religious philosophers. And I always thought that when people are rock bottom, that's when, God or the spirit or grace comes. And I at least for me, it's absolutely not how it works. I think the better I am, the more I feel the grace and the ability to give to people and build community and be other people's strengths, which I really want to be. That's one of my aspirations. And when I was rock bottom, I became so practical and so much of a survivor. And I felt that it's more like the animalistic bottom of Maslow pyramid. I mean, I didn't do anything, unethical at the time, but I was definitely at my most selfish in those 2 years. Yeah.
Just more of a short-term mindset than trying to think about long-term.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's even research to show that when you have PTSD or even very deep depression, you don't have any sense of the future. And I definitely can speak to that. When you have major trauma, you can't even think about tomorrow. It's a very interesting. You learn a lot about neuroplasticity. I think it's kind of the darker version of what happens to people during psychedelic experiences or very high levels of meditation. So yeah, the brain is a very interesting place.
So
I have some weird light because the sun is doing things here. So just let me know if it's anywhere.
No worries. Only if it's distracting you. Do you want to adjust it?
I'm good, but if I have like some weird shadow on me, just let me know.
No, you look fine. This is the Pathless Path podcast. We embrace imperfections.
Are Ingrid Bergman lighting with half the face in shadow suggestively and the other half looking at Bogar.
So where you are now is a very different place than 2015. What were some of the things that started to shift you in a new direction?
It was a long process. And at the beginning, I think like everybody, when you make a change in your life, at first you try to operate post-change using your old strategies. Because that's kind of all you know, right? You can't just wake up and know new things or unlearn old things, right? And so you kind of half-heartedly throw your old strategies at new problems. And the first couple of years is just like learning that this is not going to work. Like you can keep doing this and wait, but no, you should just stop doing that. And I think it just went very global, very early. I knew from my old film work, actually, because I worked in film, I had heard a lot of the bad advice about film. So when people started saying that in the startup world, I was just like, no, next. Like this is not true. Like fall in love with the problem, not the solution, they say to the startup founder. And in the screenplay, they are like, okay, but can we root for your hero? Shut up. Next. Or, in film, they will tell you, write a con-winning thing in your country and then get a job in Hollywood. That's never happened. Or like it only happens for directors. It's a very rare path. And it's an outlier path. And they like shove so many people into really overfunded, terrible European art movies who are only doing that because they want to work globally. It makes zero sense. So they do this startup-wise as well, like, oh, don't do US, do local. Because I don't know, you are in Frankfurt. We should grow the Frankfurt startup scene. And I was like, fuck the local startup scene. You want to build for the public. You have to find your users. Maybe they are not here. Maybe they are somewhere else. I don't care. I can just like talk to anybody with this magic machine, And so I think I was in London, and because I was not really integrated in society there, it was very hard to get accepted. I think it was a very emotionally very difficult experience, but it just sent me on the internet. And then you're talking to Mason Hartman, and then you're talking to Visa Verosami. It's 2017. You're talking to Sam Altman. You're talking to all these people, and who cares where you are? And the next thing I knew, I was in San Francisco. That was my first time in the US. And I'm not kidding you, the first meeting I had on New Montgomery Street became my first investor. I was really like fresh off the boat. Because I think at the time I really, really knew what I wanted to do and what I had to do, and that I was the only person who could really do this, and that this was perfectly justified, and everything in my life kind of, trained me for dealing with these problems that I was about to be solving as a life job. And also you learned you learn how much bad advice there is, and you start trusting, at least for me, I really started trusting my own guts about things when I had tried everything else that people had recommended to me, and it was sometimes working, but sometimes not. But the statistics were as good as with my own ideas, so I didn't have any data to show that I should listen to other people. Anyway, I mean, I do listen to some people, but, you have to earn it.
And I think for context, you were working on a startup, right? And it wasn't exactly what it is now, Interintellect, but you kept finding yourself kind of drifting in that direction, doing this stuff that became Interintellect.
Yeah, to the point where at some point I was running basically two things. This was the beginning of 2019. And I was so intent on building this app and this bot, and it was 2016, 17, all those the era's demands. And then the Interintellect was growing on the side, and I was just like, oh, that's just my side project that everybody's interested in. But let me build this app, And then at some point I had to sit down and think, like, first of all, all the three people that I somehow emotionally blackmailed into using my app are in Interintellect. But there are also like thousands of more people in Interintellect. So what am I thinking of? Like, do I think of like, oh, at some point the app will be ready and all these people will be like, yay, another app, and they would just or what? And so I was like, oh, I guess I'm running Interintellect now. And it was a little bit just like, you're in a restaurant and there's like an empty table on a table with all the good foods and all the good friends. And I just like kind of quietly got up from one table and went over and like sat down to the other. And I was like, I'm a little bit late to my own party, but let's do this. And then when I decided that I would just run it by myself, things really took off. But everybody told me that I should build an app and that I should have a co-founder. So, and I really wanted to get into YC, and I think a lot of my previous actions were somehow limited by this obsession that unless I get into YC, I can't build a company and nobody will give me money. And that actually nearly killed me off and made me leave tech. So, but I love them, but it's not for everybody, right? Some people have to do some other stuff because they have to be on the pathless path.
Yeah. And it's really amazing what started to emerge in 2018. I was experiencing this too. I was living in Taiwan and feeling lost on my path after uprooting my life a year or two before that and starting to find these people online. And you eventually dropped this article, which I think sort of dropped a bomb on the the curious internet. And I wanted to read a part of it. You're talking about there's this feeling online. And around 1.5 years ago, at first faintly, I started noticing a new tune under the buzz. There appeared a positive, encouraging theme that since then has kept growing and mutating and bringing a lot of us together in conversation, unlikely companions from all over the world and layers of society. And it was this idea around the interintellect, which I think is a term you coined. And it really was something. And it was so exciting when you put this out there. It was like, oh, yes, I'm not crazy. These collection of curious humans, something's happening here. What was happening then?
I was feeling a little bit, do you know Hugh Laurie, Fry and Laurie have this song, protest song. It's like a Bob Dylan parody, and they parody
Hugh Laurie has songs?
So back in the day, they had this TV show in the UK called Fry and Laurie.
I just know House.
Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie. And they have this wonderful video. It's on YouTube called Protest Song. And they parody, John Baez and Bob Dylan and all this. And I think the chorus is like, like they list all the societal problems, world hunger, nuclear proliferation, blah, blah, blah. And then the answer is, and it's just like this mumbling. And that's the culmination of every verse. And I really try to avoid that in my article. That I wouldn't be like, oh, here's like a universal solution. Oh, find it in your heart or some other bullshit. I really do think that, that simply removing some boundaries between people would help. And this also came from yet another thing that I thought at the time, the contemporary media and discourse was simply wrong about. Like, everybody told us that, the internet is terrible, they will murder you, they will cancel you, it's all polarized, you can't leave two humans alone because they will just fight. And I'd never seen that. Like, I was running all these events and I was bringing together really like opinionated people, and I always felt that, okay, if the kind of set and settings are right, then things will be fine. But it was really only with Interintellect that I started seeing that at scale. And I noticed that there is so much need and demand for this kind of thing. And then I started thinking, okay, maybe we could do culture without culture war. Like, what would that look like? But I really want to go back to 2018, because I think 2018, at least for me, was kind of a watershed moment in this sense as well. Because 2018 was not just a period, or 2018, 2019 was not just a period when, this kind of hippie-ish, everybody together, post-rationalists and AI people and painters and musicians, and we just like love each other. It was also a time when there was so much pressure to go culture war. Like, I distinctly remember a time on Twitter, and I was still on Medium, I was not on Substack yet, when I started feeling that, oh my God, if I started doing culture war content, I would explode. Like, I would be huge. I could make a killing. And there were actual, queries toward me, sometimes very much like with spoken words, that, don't do a startup, just like organize parties and be this connector woman. Basically it's like, we need, politically ambiguous, so very sociable women who will kind of do these things and be spokespeople of ideas that might serve the culture war agenda. And I thought, I don't want to do that. First of all, I don't believe that. I have very different beliefs about politics.
You're too curious.
And I thought that to me that seems very short-term thinking. I'm more interested in something that will last hundreds of years. Anyway, so it was very interesting. So 2018, I basically made this decision that even if we're smaller, we will not do those things.
Yeah, and you basically what you were doing is making an observation that and a call out to, hey, there used to be these intellectual salons. They were small groups, certain places, famous times of history. They were mostly the elite. But now it's everyone. Everyone can participate.
Yes.
Like, how are people missing this?
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, this deal that you're getting from society that, oh, you go to university and then you're there for 2 to 5 years and you're having a really good time, right? At least most people are having good times. And you have access to this cultural and intellectual and artistic abundance. And then the moment when you start getting good at it and start enjoying it, they kick you out and they're like, well, that was this. Thanks for your money. Now you're an adult and now read newsletters, buy a book at the airport. And I think it's exactly when people grow into the age when they really have something to say. When you have the life experience, when you can read a book, watch a movie, hear somebody speak, and now you have personal experience, your own stories, a lot of other books that you have now read. I want to hear from those people. And the fact that there's no platform for cultural or intellectual interaction where you're safe from political agendas or anybody trying to manipulate your content, to me, the fact that that didn't exist, seems still insane to me. So I thought, okay, what if anybody who had a laptop could just come and talk about things that interest them? Duh, To me, it seemed very. I mean, as a triple immigrant, of course, I have been in situations when you can't even afford to go to a lecture. Right? You just buy a used book for £1 on Amazon and sit on the tube while you're going to your customer service job and read in the morning, and there's nobody to talk with about whatever you're reading, whatever you're thinking about. And I thought, okay, what if this was affordable? What if some people could also make money doing this? So yeah, these were my considerations at the time.
You also in that original article, you used the term unbossing, which I love. And it's sort of this idea.
What is that?
You wrote unbossing was basically that, okay, the gatekeepers are dead, but we're still pretending like we need to go through gatekeepers. And this resonates so deeply because the entire time writing my book, I'm like, well, I must be missing something. I must need to get approval. And the reality is, like, you don't need approval anymore. And that discomfort is so dizzying for some people that they seek the approval, right? And it's like, no, you can just do things in this world. But we all grew up with these scripts that say we need to look to the boss for approval.
I remember it. But I think I've changed my mind about this in the past 4 years.
Yeah,
this is exactly
I'd love to hear that.
4 years ago. Because what I think is happening now, and this is absolutely true for me, because I've deviated from multiple paths and created my own combination of, areas of expertise and my non-existent pedigree. I think I don't know why Stephen Fry is on my mind today, but Stephen Fry said this thing that the good thing about going to Oxford or Cambridge is that you don't have to deal with not having to have gone there. That's it. And I do think now that the amount of energy it takes for me to balance out the fact that I don't really have an academic or professional pedigree. I mean, I have good degrees, but I'm in rooms with people who never ever have to think about feeling that they belong to the room because of where they went to school, or their first couple of workplaces. And what I feel through the grants that I'm in and the programs that I'm in is that if you can choose not to go through the traditional Victorian, good high school, good university, good internship, good first job, and then you start your company, and then you go to a good accelerator, and blah, blah, blah. Is that you have to create your own gatekeepers, because there are gatekeepers, and now you have to create your own combination depending on where you want to get in. And which is very, very familiar to startup founders when you create your investor portfolio, basically, your cap table. And as opposed to a traditional form of gatekeeping where a lot of the rules are really old and independent of you, and both parties know what they expect or what to expect. When it's your own gatekeeping setup, you don't know, right? Like people, like even in the best cases, with these amazing grants that are, proliferating on the internet now, a lot of people don't know why they won. You meet them, you talk with them, and some people are like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. So it's a black box. And I think that one underexplored positive of a traditional gatekeeping model for some people, for the very few people who actually qualify, is that it was not a black box. Whereas now we're kind of alone with figuring out your own gatekeepers and the rules and the implicit contracts and whatever.
I think that resonates a lot. And I mean, I had the advantage of going through some of the traditional path, and it helps me understand how the world works, right? I think over the long term, these scripts are going to soften, right? But they still matter. And
right.
If you are going to take your own path, you need to spend more time understanding how the world actually works instead of how you want it to work. And I think that's a big challenge for people on unconventional paths. And I mean, for you've had the advantage of emigrating 3 times and restarting your life. And in that experience, you've had to learn so many things.
Yeah, and one of the
but it takes a long time.
It takes some time, and sometimes it's really surprising. I was in Brussels for a couple of years during the pandemic, and it was very cold in my apartment, even if I put on the heating. And so at some point I bought myself a Patagonia vest because I thought I'm not going to get rheumatism, in my 30s just because of the climate. And I sometimes would go to Zoom calls. I don't know, somebody invited me to give a talk and whatever, and I would be in, it would be, I don't know, 2 a.m. my time because it would be in the US. And so it's very cold in my Brussels apartment. I would put on my Patagonia vest over my outfit. And people spoke to me like I went to Stanford. Like it's just nobody asked. It's just there's this woman calling in a Patagonia vest. Surely she was my classmate. And I just loved that. I was like, guys, just get yourself either a real or a fake vest, and whenever
Patagonia vest
cosplay,
much cheaper.
Just put it on. I learned this in a cold country. It works.
Yeah, I do sense that at least in the US, there is much more looseness about class and credentials. These things still matter, but it's like it's going to help you, but you can also sort of succeed without those, maybe more than any other country. Would you resonate with that?
Actually,
yeah. Yeah, I don't know how. I mean, I know you haven't spent tons of time in the US, but you've been exposed to it more in the past few years.
I did spend a lot of time in the US, and almost all of my investors are in the US, and 55% of our users at Interintellect are in the US. So I had a very interesting conversation about this with Emmett Shear, which is that
he was Twitch.
Yeah, and recently was a CEO of Twitch, and he's a good friend and investor in Interintellect. So 2 things. I would say 2 things. One is that what was very difficult for me in the UK at the beginning was that I was this restarting, went through hardship, self-made woman narrative, right? When I was fundraising or pitching or talking at a startup, whatever. And that narrative doesn't work in the UK. So the first weird thing was learning how what I am and what I'm good at and what's good about me is very much welcome in the US. So this kind of hypomanic, explorer, pioneer narrative is really, really strong there. In the UK, no. In the UK, you can't do everything went fine. Like the Kurt Vonnegut story, like everything went fine. And then I fell into a hole. And then with my great strengths and knowledge, I rebuilt myself. You can't do that. In the UK, you have to show that you've been always lucky. So good birth, good parents, good school, good kindergarten, good school, blah, blah, blah. And then, then they want you to continue to be lucky at their company or whatever, with their money. In the US, you have to show that there was something that you had to overcome, because everybody knows in the US that if you have good parents, good schools, that will keep you afloat. What they want to see, like, okay, what can you do? Why should I hire you? Like, we have hundreds of millions of people. Other people want this job. Other people want this check. Why, or airtime? Why should it be you? And so that was a kind of fit, I think, for me. And there's also this thing that in Europe, especially in the UK, which is a Northern Kingdom masquerading as a free society, there is only one real success, and that's decided before you were born. So you're gaslighted in this weird kind of hustle culture that you can change your fate, but you can't really do that, or very few people can do that. And in the US, there is a huge plurality of success. So you can be, like there are so many different ways of being a top person in the US. So if you this, you can always be that. And that's just as good, right? Because there's no nobility in the European sense. But I only really started like understanding these nuances because on the surface, so many things are similar. When I started spending more time in New York, which on the surface seems harder than London, but because New York is what it says it is, people are more relaxed. Because people can deal with hardship and people can deal with competition and people can deal with discomfort if there's integrity and you know what you're getting and the social contract works. And I know that in the many places in the US, the social contract stopped working because you no longer get this thing where, the state will look after you less, but in exchange, you can go farther because a lot of people can't go farther. And so you see the political and social crisis in the US simply coming from the realization that in vast parts of the country, the contract no longer works. But I think in the big hubs, it still works.
Yeah, New York knows exactly what it is. It's like if you put effort in and like kick ass, you succeed, people will be like, "Oh, you're making a lot of money. You deserve that money."
Absolutely. You can stop any passerby in New York, ask them to summarize the city, and they will be correct.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're spot on about the US. You basically need to be in a growing city now. And San Fran's a unique case. I think it has huge halo effect from the tech economy, but it has its own issues. But yeah, I'd love to shift to a little more intellect. How many salons have you held at this point?
Myself or the platform?
The platform.
I don't know the exact figure, but 4,000 something.
Wow. That's amazing. And these are typically 2 to 3 hour things that people do. Maybe just share a little bit about what these are like. So I guess it varies now.
It varies. So for those of you who don't know Interintellect, we're a curated events marketplace for artists and intellectuals where anybody with the idea and the ambition can come and start their own events, online or offline. It can be a one-off or a series, and build their own community around those ideas and make some money along the way if they want to. We have a community tier with the most passionate attendees who can come to our forum and hang out together and with the host. We're a very deep thinking and deep feeling community with a lot of big relationships, book projects, collaborations, friendships, group holidays coming out of just people meeting in our community or among our hosts. The standard Interintellect salon is around 2 hours, a 2-hour-long online gathering where you will talk about an idea, a book, a big question of life, moderated by a host or multiple hosts. And then we have a variety of different variations on this series that run for over a year or indefinitely. Super salons where a celebrity comes and hangs out with you. members-only gatherings where people just play Cards Against Humanity or Werewolf or learn how to, I don't know, produce music on their computers. And then we have a bunch of offline hubs around the world. And those people come together often just to go to the museum together or have a picnic and just enjoy having a mind without having to worry about what it means that you want to think and talk and challenge yourself. I think it's the most beautiful thing that people can do. And I'm very happy to have this job.
Yeah, one frame I've been thinking about is I sort of think there are question people and then there are answer people. Question people love exploring the questions, right? And they'll just keep going and digging deeper. And answer people love to know what they think. Here's what I think, here's exactly, and they don't want to explore the question. I'm wondering if you think this resonates and like how that would map to like all the humans on Earth. Like I sort of think there's like just 5 to 10% of people that are just question people and they need to find each other.
Interesting. Yeah, it's probably very similar to the openness.
Yeah.
A number in the Big Five psychology test, openness to experience, I think it's called. I always say that a good host is always on the fence. You can't really host an event having a very firm opinion, because then you will not be able to really neutrally navigate the room and ensuring that everybody's heard and everybody gets, undivided attention. I remember when I was 27, I was still in Budapest, and I was having a Christmas dinner with a couple of old college girlfriends of mine. And I had this sudden vision or realization as I was sitting there listening to people that we would call them maybe normies today or conformists. I don't know. It's a dangerous dichotomy because we all have everything, right? It's just a question of proportion. And I realized that, oh my God, a lot of these women that I knew at the age of 27 kind of stop, or at least periodically. And they say, okay, I'm 27. This is what I learned. This is where I traveled. This is who I slept with. These are the internships that I did. And from now on, I'm going to live off of this. I'm going to be not a maker of the world, but a user. And I remember sitting there like this little idiot elf that I am. Guys, what the fuck are you talking about? You haven't even started yet. I don't know shit. I'm just starting. Are you seriously going to stop here? Nothing has ever happened to me. I was just like in my early 20s making mistakes. Give it to me now. I want to go. And I think for my kind of understanding of the proportions was more like it's 20% of people who kind of feel that, oh, my youth is just the first offer that I don't accept, Yeah, you have the first offer. Everybody gets the devil's pact. Everybody gets the devil's offer. When people are like, oh, you wanted to be an opera singer. Well, but here's, being a banker and singing karaoke with your friends. Or, oh, you wanted to be a quarterback. Well, here is like a very shitty local version of that where you play something on your computer. And I felt that, oh, I got all the devil's offers in my 20s. Like all of it was thrown at me. And I thought, okay, do I want to be this little over-bloated nobody in this tiny country having received the least challenging or meaningful versions of my dreams? Or am I going to pack and sell everything, go to the hardest place in Europe? Like I went to the hardest place where my passport would get me, and see what I'm made of. And to me, because my parents are very famous and, my entire life when I was young was like, people would look at my ID card and be like, there you go, miss, I mean, it had more negative sides than positive, but this thing of like, getting into the room was not a problem. And I wanted to experience being this complete nobody coming from Eastern Europe. Like Eastern Europeans are really looked down upon in London. So you're this discriminated against minority. And I wanted to see that because I didn't want to grow old or just like be an adult in a city and have children without ever having, gathered the data about my own abilities, because then how do I know who I am? And I do think that a lot of people who stay with the first offer, they don't really know. And the reason why people go into your community and my community and want to read about the pathless path and the boundless thinking is because the curiosity doesn't go away. And I think the cost of continuing to think deep into your adulthood is much lower now than any other time. Like you can stay, where you are, and you can have the job that you picked for yourself when you were 20 and still read your book and gain something and change your thinking and maybe even value what you already have more. And I really deeply respect people who go and try and then return to their roots, whether that's a religious reconversion or actually going home. Or in some cases, I have friends whose parents divorced in older age and went back to their high school sweethearts. Like even that happens. But that's your choice now. If you have never tried, then it's not your choice yet. It just looks like it.
I love that framing. Life's giving you offers and you're saying, I'm going to try the next offer I get. And it's funny. I think my wife and I sort of fell into this trap with childhood, but having a child. You sort of think, okay, we're having a child. We need to get serious about life. And the great thing is the child.
Serious people. I follow you on Instagram. You seem like very serious young parents.
Well, the thing you realize, what I mean serious is you have to pick one location. You have to know what you're doing. You have to buy a house, right? And it's the great thing is the offer came in the form of the child, and she sort of reignited our adventurous spirit. It's oh, we're still here. We're still curious people. We're probably going to explore. It's just going to be better with a child. And it sort of never goes away, the need to have to remind yourself that life is a continuous act of finding out and asking questions. But yeah, I think it does get harder as you age.
This is so, yeah. When people tell me I'm going to get a stable job, or we will have a child, or we will get a house, that will solve the problem. And I'm no, you will have a new problem.
Yeah, where is the stable?
It's a huge problem. Now you've just given yourself a 14-year-long problem, which is fine if this is the problem you want to have. But to think about these insane, life decisions as something that will solve the problems of you don't know what you want to do with your life, that's horrible. And so many people kind of do this kind of logical swap. And I'm no, that's not how it goes. But I have a question for you. Do you think? Yeah. I mean, this is something that I spent almost all of the winter kind of mulling over and thinking about. Do you think that conformism or nonconformism, if we I know it's not two separate polarities, but let's just for the sake of argument pretend that there's no overlap. Do you think it's something that you're born with and everybody has a built-in baseline of adventurousness and we should just let people do whatever they want? Or do you think it's completely, a decision question or an environment question or a level of information about the world question?
I think it's both. I think there's definitely a genetic setting, right? You can often see it by looking at your siblings and being I've seen them make many decisions, and it's obvious something's happened there. But I think it's environment too. I think in a place like the US where the labor market is really good and you can make good money and stable, you can relatively find stable, good paying jobs here. And I think that gets a lot of people indexing too far to the conformism, right? Where they're probably overpricing the safety and security and underpricing adventure and risk, right? I think, Nassim Taleb writes about this in Anti-Fragile, where he's people think they're selecting for less randomness in their life, but actually picking like a job invites more randomness, because if you randomly get fired, that is extremely disruptive to your life. Versus my path, like I have no idea what I'm going to make this year, next year, or next month, but I've developed an emotional resilience for that, and I'm not going to make zero, which is really interesting. So long answer is like definitely genetic, but I think the environment nudges people away from the adventure on average in many places.
I'm sorry to say that I really agree with Taleb here, because I think it's similar. It's a different way of saying that, you choose something that you think is a solution, and you've just given yourself another problem.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting for me because I was a bit of a conformist person in my 20s. Like I followed the default path.
You posted a photo from like, I don't know, like an office. And it was so
corporate.
strange. It was some Photoshop situation.
It's weird. It's weird for me to look at because it's like, how did I end up so deep down that path? And I think the thing is, like, I was good enough at it and good at fitting in. I always felt like an outsider though, because I didn't grow up with like an elite path. So I was always sort of pretending and performing. And I just ignored the signals that it was the wrong path, because when you're succeeding and making good money, everybody implicitly supports your life. And I think the reason many people don't take an alternative path like mine is because they are accurately realizing that they will get less support, which is true. And I think this is why communities like yours are so important, because you can just go enroll in your membership and instantly find the support you need.
I think so. And I think it kind of goes back to maybe an even more basic problem that we have, which is that most people never get good feedback. We have this weird kind of warped way of looking at people. So when we see somebody who is beautiful, well-dressed, well-spoken, kind, charitable, smart, funny, like whatever they're doing that pleases you, you think, oh, I'm sure he hears this all the time. And no, because everybody else also thinks this. So oftentimes, just like I think, the Michael Nielsen note on like the insane, ROI on just raising aspirations, just like spotting something that's good and telling the other person can change a life. Nobody ever gives, people give good feedback when they have to, when they want something, when they are courting, like there are specific scenarios, but it's very, very rare. And so I often think that if you want to see more out of the box thinking around yourself, adventurousness, dedication in the arts, in self-learning, or self-led learning, in, independent research, just tell somebody like, oh, actually what you're talking about is really interesting. I would like to read about this more. What are the 7 books I should read? And, by the time that person puts the email together for you with the 7 books, they're basically writing a PhD proposal. And who knows what happens? Next thing you know, paid Substack, Joe Rogan interview, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really, really, really worth your time. And I just, anybody who's listening to this, if there are 2 people in your life right now who are just amazing at something, please text them. Just tell them, whatever it is. Any job well done, from gardening to playing the cello to just being a good conversationalist that you can trust, and just tell them. Maybe they don't know. I'm pretty sure they don't know.
Yeah, I love this. I've done some group coaching and some one-on-one coaching. I don't really do it anymore, but one exercise is the best self exercise, which is just email 5 friends and ask them when they've seen you at your best self.
Yeah.
100% of the time, people are like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize people saw this in me, right? Because they're not getting the feedback. And Like, I actually spend a lot of my time doing this. It's so important to me because when I first took the leap, I felt so ashamed of what I was doing. I felt like I was a bad person for like wasting my talent and doing a weird path and not having a story. And I didn't really have a lot of active support. I had support in the sense of if I failed, would people take me in? Sure. But people weren't like rooting for me. And I think rooting for people is so important in today's world because it actually takes so little to change someone's life. It's kind of crazy. I'm sure you've seen examples of this in your community.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the driving forces of Interintellect. And I think, as you're also, I think it's important that we are, honest with people who are listening to us, that if you deviate from the immediate norms of your immediate community, it's possible that at least temporarily you will lose the support of those nearest you. Just because even just going against other people's expectations can be a little bit offensive or shocking or disorienting to another person. And it's in those moments when the wider circles of friends, online communities, writing groups, the weak ties become so important. And just trust the process and know that most of the people, even if you lose a couple of friends for a few months, they will come around and they will understand that your choice is not about them. It's not a criticism, implicit criticism of their lives. They also are the heroes of their own movie, and they see through the prism of that. I think that's very, very important. And I can only attest to the incredible, humbling gratitude, exploding feeling of, the moment when you realize that, oh my God, people want me to do what I'm doing. I mean, for me, I think still every time, people, sign up for an Interintellect membership or they reach out to me or they just like talk to me on Twitter or on Substack, I'm like, oh my God, people actually want me to continue doing what I'm doing because they need my work. And I think as far as human experience or human experiences, plural, go, that's kind of the best thing you can get. That's as good as it gets.
Are there any people we should highlight here to give them a boost of...
I would really recommend for people to check out the 2023 Interintellect Fellows. This was our first fellowship where we supported financially 5 independent researchers and makers. And you can find them through our website, interintellect.com. You will find job transition as one of the areas of research, talent, but there's also friendship, education, and public philosophy. So I'm very proud of that. I wish I could have given more money because this is like a micro grant, but still, my life was changed by, a couple of thousands of dollars that enabled me to go to SF in 2019, and then a tiny EV grant I won that enabled me to move out of London the same year. 2019 was a crazy year for me. And so I know that most people just don't have that little, amount of savings that can just like get you to the next level of the game. And so, keep an eye out on Interintellect's fellowships, but also there are so many good fellowships now. Almost every community or, organization is giving away just a couple of $1,000s. And sometimes that's all you need.
I love that. Yeah. I pulled them up.
There's so much money and people want to give you this money. Take the money.
Brian Cam, Mary Bajorek, and Linus Liu. I'll link them up. I definitely want...
Two rounds.
Oh, amazing. I'll pull up the other names and link them. But yeah, I know we've talked about things I might be able to do to support them. So stay tuned for that. And how has Tyler Cowen helped to raise your aspirations? Because he has this emergent ventures program and he's supported so many people. It's amazing. He does
mentorship at a scale that just blows my mind so much. I think he's definitely one of the 3 main mentors for me. I'm always a little bit reluctant to say that because he's like a public treasure. So you can't just like monopolize Tyler. But
well, I think this is an interesting thing because like he really cares. And just a small vote of confidence for him can have a huge effect. And this is possible for many people, I think.
I remember I had lunch with Tyler in March 2019, right before I went to US. I told you that was a crazy year, and we had lunch. And I remember I was so nervous that he ate like 4 courses in front of me, and I was still starter. And then I went home, and my friend, who was another winner and who was kind of advocating for me, was like, how is it going to go? And I remember just like crying for an hour, like, this is completely pointless. I would never get this. I will never even apply. And then I didn't apply. And then I went to SF the second time in August 2019, and I was yet again having lunch with another EB winner. Always have lunches with people. That's a really good strategy, even if you forget to eat. And okay, so I was meeting with this person at OpenAI, and we were having OpenAI food. And I got so upset by the notion that I would need to apply to an EV grant and be rejected that I went and I was crying in OpenAI's toilet. So, my simulation is weird. So here I am crying in OpenAI's toilet in San Francisco and deciding I will never, ever apply because who would ever give me a grant? And then in October 2019, right before I left London, everything was going terribly, really badly. And so I thought, okay, so now I feel so shitty that if I apply now and when I get rejected, I will not even feel it because like I'm already feeling terrible. So I applied and like literally got the grant the next day. And I was like, oh my God, Anna, grow up. What the fuck? And I learned so much because I have this instinct when something potentially good is happening that I just become super depressed and decide that this is never going to happen. Why would this happen? And now I'm like, no, you just have to try. Just put yourself into another difficult situation. So this is not the most difficult situation you have to deal with. Deal with it and realize that you were wrong. This works, guys. This is my recipe for a good life.
I love it. Yeah, learning. It seems like it's inevitable.
You're great. This has nothing to do with you.
It's amazing how we all need to take like the slow, dumb, like hard way. Like it's just how life works, and it sucks, but it's also like beautiful too. Wanted to do some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
If you had to organize a dinner party, alive or dead, who would be at the dinner party with you?
5 people.
It doesn't have to be 5. You can change the table size if you want.
Definitely a couple of Romans. So like Caesar, Mark Antony, maybe, a couple of people from there. Maybe Seneca. I would be interested. So one of them, maybe Mark Antony would be interesting because I don't fully understand the guy. Who else? Probably Da Vinci because I would be too curious, and apparently he was a sweetheart. Who else? I'm thinking whether I would want some religious person. Descartes would be interesting. Either Descartes or Leibniz or Spinoza, like one of these 3 guys. I would definitely have a conversation. I would probably want to talk to James Joyce because I don't like his books and I want to like them. So if I got to like him as a person, that would help. And Elena Ferrante. I want to bitch with her about boys.
I like it. Who are your path role models?
Path? When I was 11, I was in a church and I heard a Port Clare, so a Franciscan female monk, a nun, talk about her first pilgrimage and becoming a nun. And it was a story of leaving everything that you thought you were behind and choosing a very different path. And I think about this speech that she gave very frequently ever since then. And I think it's just the most beautiful ancient human story of humans, originating somewhere in Africa, and there always being a couple of people who are like, okay, this was great. Now let's see what's on the other side of the mountain. And sometimes you have to go because there's no food or no water. Sometimes you're fighting with your brother and you have to leave. But sometimes you're just like, those seem like interesting birds. Anybody else? Let's go.
If you had to live in one place for the rest of your life, where are you picking?
But I can leave it, so I can travel, right?
Yeah, you can travel. Still got planes and maybe teleportation in the future. I love how seriously you're thinking about this question.
In a little bit different reality, I would want to be in Israel. Because I would want to be in a place that is the source of things. So it would have to be a location that is like, the end and the beginning somehow.
What's the most surprising thing that's emerged out of Interintellect?
People getting married to each other.
How many so far?
We have, I think, 5 or 6 very serious relationships. And all of them moved countries, continents for each other. It's beautiful.
Wow. Any Interintellect babies yet?
Not yet, but we started Intellect, which is a salon series where you can bring your baby. And because a lot of people
need to attend.
Yeah, you have to come. Or you can host one and talk about, because they're always thematic.
That'd be so much fun.
Like you can talk about immigration and adventures while a parent. So we're preparing the ground. Yeah, I'm in a competition with Matt Clifford, my friend, because EF, which is combining startup founders, they already had babies, but they are 11-year-old and we are like 4 years old. So, but I have to catch up,
I love that. Yeah, I'm counting on many of the people working on stuff to figure out all this schooling and future stuff for my daughter. Amazing. Where can people learn more about what you're working on? Anywhere you want to send people?
Yes, come to interintellect.com. And now we also have a Substack, interintellect.substack.com, where I have my Friday digest, which I will write later today. And
it's so good.
It's all the things you should read, guys. Don't look anywhere else. Just read my digest and read those things, and that's all you need to know about the world.
It is so good. I'm just like, how is she reading so much good stuff every week?
I don't know. I wish
always been a reader.
Up and just would sleep or something. Well, that's not happening.
That's amazing. Yeah, I will link those up. Highly recommend Interintellect. I've been a member for a few years now. Have attended many
with
amazing
events.
Yeah? Yeah, and just helping me make friends around the world. It's really enriched my life. I really mean it when I say you've created positive externalities by your creation for my life that are sort of undeniable. And I appreciate that. I'm rooting for you and excited to see what comes next.
So much, Paul. I'm very, very, happy to have learned more about you, and all the wonderful questions also came as a nice surprise. So thank you.
Hey there. Thanks for watching that episode of the Pathless Path podcast in video form on YouTube. If you want to see more episodes, you can find links to further episodes up here, or you can subscribe over here. Thank you for your support, and I wish you luck on your own pathless path.